Do you ever catch yourself replaying past conversations, overanalyzing decisions, or stressing over things you can't control? If you're anything like me, the answer is yes. And we're going to talk about that in today's podcast. Overthinking, how it affects our productivity, how it affects our lives, and how we can overcome the hurdle of overthinking and worrying to just have a better overall life. Welcome to the Fire Inside podcast. You know that you have a fire in your heart and ambition in your soul. You know what you want to do and you know you need to make a change to get there. So how do you do it with more ease? That is what we tackle in this podcast. All things personal development, leveling up to become your best self, time management, and all of the things you need to know so that you can just become better and do better. Now, I realize in every podcast episode, I've been introducing myself, and that might be redundant and not needed. But real quick, I am Sade Kelly. I'm a time management coach. I help ambitious people manage their time so they can manage their work, wellness, and relationships peacefully. I am really passionate about today's episode because what I'm talking about is kind of what has been happening in my life in a way. So today is a great example. I am filming on my usual film day, but I woke up this morning and I noticed that my son wasn't really feeling so well. And now my husband had been feeling sick for the last couple of days, but we had been doing everything to help him get better because I need all the help I can get. And then also my mom has been here for the last month visiting from New York, and she happened to not be feeling well this morning either. So when my son and my mom and now my husband, who was slightly recovering, all were not feeling well, yet I was feeling pretty good, things, started to go off in my head where I was like, I wonder what they're all suffering from. Is it just a cold? What's going on? And eventually we ended up in urgent care, and nonetheless, everyone is fine now. We got the right meds. We got everything we need to get done. But my life and my day was completely derailed. I am now filming and it's nighttime, which is crazy to me. And I'm exhausted. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I am tired, but I committed to showing up every single week, 52 episodes this year, and I'm here. Done is better than perfect. And I was overthinking, like, should I still do this? Should I still record? Should I record multiple episodes like I usually do? Probably not going to do that. This is probably the one and done for tonight because I need to go tend to my family. And luckily, I still feel good. Fingers crossed. I still feel good and I don't get sick. But I think this is something I wasn't planning to share, obviously, when I wrote the outline for this episode, because I do prepare for these. But I realized, okay, I'm not going to let overthinking stop me from showing up, and I'm going to come on here and talk about overthinking. And of course, God decided to make my day a day that was completely unlike what it was supposed to be. And I could have overanalyzed. I could have thought of all the different scenarios like I typically tend to do, but I didn't. I actually use a lot of the frameworks I'm going to be covering in today's episode to help me to show up today and to help me to keep showing up, because consistency compounds, and when we can keep showing up over and over again, we'll be more proud of ourselves, we'll actually get better, and we'll be happy that we did it even though it wasn't perfect, because perfection is actually what's keeping us and holding us back. A lot of times when we're trying to be perfect is why we're not showing up. It's why we're overthinking. It's why we second guess ourselves. It's why we don't have self-trust or we lack self-esteem, is because we haven't trained ourselves to show up when we say we will, no matter what. And no matter what means no matter what, right? And some people might be like, is there different scenarios where you don't need to show up? And yeah, obviously, if I was completely sick and couldn't talk, I wouldn't have shown up, but I'm not, right? So here I am showing up, and I want to talk about overthinking and worrying, because this is something that I've seen happen for a lot of my clients. So actually recently they had asked me about, like, how can we overcome this overthinking aspect of our lives, because it stops us from taking the action that we planned for. Because a lot of women I work with, they learn how to plan really well and they learn a lot of time management techniques, but sometimes there's that mindset issues we talk about mindset in every episode, but sometimes there's those mindset issues that are holding people back, and it makes complete sense. On average, American adults make 36,000 decisions every single day. And as we make more and more decisions, it weakens our willpower. So when you are a constant worrier, when you're someone who writes like a lot of pros and cons lists, or you need a lot of time to sit and think about what is the right direction, that tells me that you're an overthinker. Now, I'm not saying that you don't need to think at all when you're making decisions, but you want to get out of that habit of overthinking, because overthinking is definitely hindering you and holding you back from the life that you could be living. A lot of times when you're thinking and ruminating and worrying, and I always joke that I come from a family of warriors. Like they're like professional women warriors. Like it's a play on like warriors, but they're warriors. And I joke because it's true. Like I came from a lot of people and I was around a lot of women who worried about every single thing. They would want to write all the pros and cons. They would want to talk through things. They would want a bunch of perspectives before they made a decision. And what I realized growing up is that it stopped them from a lot of opportunities, or it stopped them from just living life, or it stopped them from feeling peace, like legit, just feeling inner peace, outer peace, peace in general. Like I think that we have to learn how to overcome worrying, because it really is just hindering us. And here are some ways that I've learned to overcome overthinking that I want to share with you all, because what I realize is there's a lot of different ways in which people overthink. Now, for me, I have always been like a worrier. Like I mentioned, I'm always like, what if this happens? What if this goes wrong? What if this goes right? What if, like, I'm just like always going over all these different scenarios in my head. I'm reliving conversations, thinking about what I could have said, what that person might have said, how this could have gone, how this might go. And it's because I tend to be anxious, right? And I tend to think a lot in the future, and a lot of anxiety comes from future thinking, wanting to prevent things in the future, whatever, things like that. But some people are ruminators, meaning they're thinking in the past. Some people like to dwell and dwell. They have regrets. They have all these negative experiences that they bring into everything. And yes, a lot of that is trauma based, and you can overcome that. Obviously, I would definitely recommend working through and becoming trauma informed and understanding where that trauma comes from. But there's just different types of overthinkers. So some people ruminate, they tend to be in the past. Some people are warriors, like how I've been in the past, or how I'm overcoming, right? Because I'm changing my language, and we tend to feel a little anxious. And then there's people who overthink because they're perfectionists, right? Or they're overcoming perfectionism, and they're so obsessed over making the perfect decision because if they don't, they think something bad's going to happen, and that stops them from taking action. So they tend to procrastinate. Now, what I've realized is there really is no perfect decision. And it sounds crazy, right? Because I'm a recovering perfectionist, or I'm a progressionist, as I like to say. And the reason why that sounds crazy to me when you first hear it, at least when I first heard it, was because what do you mean there's no perfect decision? There is always a right and a wrong. There is a black and a white. And I realized that's a cognitive distortion. And there's so many cognitive distortions. Like, you guys got to look into that. It's so interesting. My therapist taught me about them, and now I've done the rabbit hole. I've done all the research, and I realized I have some overgeneralizations and some black and white cognitive distortions that I'm working through. And actually my husband realized it too through my work that I've done, and he's been changing with those things. But I find it so interesting because I think when you realize there's no perfect decision, you get better at making decisions. And I'm going to share a little bit more about how you realize that in a second. Before I get into it, I did want to share some other things that people tend to do when they overthink. So some people overthink because they have a fear of failure, which is very closely tied to perfectionism. But essentially, it just means that you don't feel you're good enough, or that you think things will go wrong, or that you think you will keep failing and you'll never be able to get to where you want to get to. That's kind of like that's kind of when you tend to overthink, because you have a fear of failure. Some people have a lack of clarity, and because they don't have a clear path, it keeps them in indecision, because they don't know where they're going full out. Like, they don't have the full roadmap, so they don't take any action. And then other people, they just have a mental overload. Like, they're just doing too much. They have too much information. They weigh too many options, and it becomes like analysis paralysis, where it's like, there's so many different routes. What do I take? And I see that a lot with business owners. There's so many people we may follow or come across, and the way the algorithms are now, we see everyone and everybody's ad and everything. And because there's so many ways you can be successful in business, people tend to not know what to stick to, and not know what step to take, or not know how to try something out, because they're like, there's so many different things that could go right, or there's so many different ways you could work out. There's so many different ways you can get abs, right? So we tend to overanalyze, we tend to overthink, and we tend to not take action, or we tend to jump around to the next shiny object and not stick to what we need to stick to. So we're going to cover all of that and how to overcome that in today's episode. The first practical strategy to stop overthinking is to set a decision deadline. Now, what that is giving yourself a time limit. And I really like time limits because they make you have a distinct deadline in which you have to make a choice. And the key is to not go back on the decision that you make. Now, I first heard this concept when I think it was Oprah who talked about this, where she talked about how, and I hope it is Oprah, and if I'm quoting somebody wrong and it's somebody else, let me know. But I remember Oprah saying that she allows herself to be upset for like a day. And then after a day, she gets over it. No matter what, she moves forward. So she gives herself the time to ruminate, to let go, to process, and then she lets it go and she goes on from there. And I really love that concept. I look up to Oprah. I've always loved Oprah. Like, she's always been like a mentor, someone just like I looked up to growing up. And I really liked that concept. And I decided to actually apply that to my own life with this decision deadline. So I used to be someone, like I mentioned, who would ruminate on things, who would feel a lot of anxiety, and I would be trying to make the perfect decision. And then I realized if I could just give myself a deadline to make the decision, I could get better at making decisions, because I truly believe that you get better at things through practice. Like, practice literally makes great. I don't want to say perfect, but the practice literally makes you better at things. So when it comes to a decision deadline, something I'll do is like, all right, I need to make a decision on this. I'm going to give myself an hour, or I'm going to give myself maybe 10 minutes if it's something a little more simpler. And then after that, I have to decide. I have to just make the decision, and then that's it. That's what I have to do. And I have to move forward from there. And the one thing I really like about that is it sets a time limit. It's very specific. It's concise. You know exactly when you're making the decision. You allow yourself the time, and then you commit. You show up and you do it. And you don't overthink it, right? Because that's your tendency. You just decide and then you let it go. Because either way, whatever decision you make, you're always going to end up where you need to be. And I think you have to have a really strong belief that everything is always working out for you. Everything is coming around. Everything is lining up. Everything is aligning for you. And if you really trust in God or whoever is your highest source or your highest, belief that you believe in, I don't know if I said that right, but you know what I mean? Whatever that is for you, then you should be able to feel grounded and know that no matter what choice I make, it's going to lead me to the choice that I need to make. And I remember seeing this quote. I see a lot of quotes, obviously, and I read a lot of things because I feel like I'm always referencing them in these episodes. But I remember I was at a printer at my old job, and I was printing out the status sheets because we have these meetings every morning. I had to go print out the sheet because my assistant wasn't in for the day. So I was by the printer, and I went to go print out the sheets for the meeting. And I saw this quote that said, no matter if you go right or you go left, you're going the right way. And I thought that was so profound, because when you really think about it, whether you go right or left, you are going the right way. And think about it even with a GPS. If you go right and it says to go left, it's going to reroute you. So you went right, but eventually you're going back to where you need to go. Or maybe you go left, but eventually you're going to go back to where you need to go. So it really should help you. I hope that helps you as well. When you're trying to make a decision, realize that no matter if you go right or left, straight, forward, back, behind, however, you're always going to get rerouted to exactly where you need to go. And it kind of reminds me of when people think about how rejection leads them to redirection. And I love that too, because any no just is going to lead you to the yes that you're supposed to get. So when you think about it like that, I think it can help you to make decisions easier. At least it's helped me a lot. A second tip that's helped me a lot is shifting from thinking to doing. So I really love the 5-second rule. We've talked about this on this podcast before. And the 5-second rule is Mel Robbins' rule, where she literally counts down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then she acts. So the reason that works so nicely is because, once again, you're giving yourself kind of like a deadline in a way, similar to the first strategy that I just gave. But instead, you're just counting it down and you're taking action. You're allowing yourself to not get to that place where you ruminate and you think too much and you overanalyze. 5 seconds is enough time to remind yourself, okay, or to say to yourself, I'm going to get out, I'm going to go do this thing, I'm going to go take an action, but I'm not going to allow myself to go past the 5 seconds, because then I'm going to hesitate. And if I can get down to just counting down and taking the action, I'm going to take more action. And I know the rule sounds silly when you think about it, when you hear it, I thought so too. When I first heard it, I was like, yeah, 5 seconds is really going to work. But it really does. If you genuinely don't want to do something and you just count down from 5, and not count up to, but count down, and then you just take action, I promise y'all, you're going to take way more action. I don't know. I mean, there's a whole science behind it, but it's so crazy, but it really does work. So as action really kills overthinking. If you're stuck in a thought and you take a small step, even if it's an imperfect step, you're going to be so happy you took the step. You're going to be so happy you decided. You're going to be so happy that you keep going. And I promise you, it works every single time. Just start practicing taking immediate action. So shift out of that thinking state that you're used to being in and shift into more of a doing state, and you will see a big shift in the things that you get done day to day. I know it's made the biggest difference for me, and it's made a huge difference for my clients and thousands of other people who follow the 5-second rule. The third tip I have is to reframe the question. So instead of asking yourself a bunch of questions like, what if I fail? Is this going to work? Should I go this way? Should I not? Should I pick this? Should I do this? Stop asking yourself all of those questions, right? Reframe the questions to make them more positive. Get out of the negative and make things more positive. So instead of, will I fail? This could go really great. How could this go great? How could this be so perfect? How could this be the best thing ever? And I don't want to say perfect because we're trying to get away from that, but you see what I'm saying. You just want to get out of a negative state and get more into a positive state and start asking yourself questions on how you can get to somewhere. And I promise you, things open up and opportunities start to really show you where they're at. So for instance, this is going to sound so small, but it proves the point. So I was building the crib for my son, which, side note, I don't know why we didn't realize that a bassinet doesn't last as long as you think. It doesn't, parents, if you are a new parent just like us. But essentially, you're eventually going to need a crib, especially if your son grows as fast as mine. And so we were building the crib, and we had, well, when I say we, really it was my husband. He dropped one of the screws that we desperately needed, and it was the last screw to finish the freaking crib. We had been working on it for like an hour. So he couldn't find the screw. We're looking all over the room, looking, can't find this screw. It's like, oh my goodness, where the heck is this screw? And my husband's like, it's gone. We lost the screw. Where's the screw? We don't know what the screw is. And like, he's kind of more in the negative. And I'm not saying it in a bad way, but just, it was observation. He was kind of in the negative. And it was something I caught because I'm someone who's really working on reframing my thoughts. It's something I talk about all the time. It's just kind of like a part of my lifestyle. A lot of these things you practice, they start to become your lifestyle because you practice them so much, especially when you coach clients. So he was saying all of that. And I was thinking to myself, what if I shifted the narrative? So instead I started saying to myself, where is this screw? This screw has to be in this room. It would be so great to find this screw. Where can I find this screw? Where is this screw? And no lie, I looked down at my feet and the screw was there. Y'all, I was like, what the? Like, it's so crazy, but it really happened like that. And then my husband looked at me and he was like, whoa, you found it? Like, you found it? And I was like, yeah. I literally asked myself, where is the screw? How can I find this screw? Will it appear? Like, is it here? Like, I just started reframing the questions to become more open-ended, more solution-based. And when you open yourself up from the problem and you become solution-based, solutions find you. And that's a small example, but things like that have happened to me so many times. There's one time where I had an issue with taxes. And I legit meditated. I laid down on the floor. I started asking myself, like, how can I solve this problem? What could I do? And I just gave myself that time to be still and meditate. And I found the solution better than my accountant. Now that tells me two things. I need a new accountant, but also that reframing totally works. So I really recommend next time you're overthinking, you're overanalyzing, you're going back and forth, reframe what you're saying to yourself. Think about what are the thoughts that you're saying to yourself, reframe them, make them positive, and solutions will find you. And you won't need to overthink because you'll know exactly what to do. And you'll know no matter what you do, it's always going to be the right decision for you because it's always going to come back to whatever you need. And then the last thing I do, kind of what I touched on already, but I really like to just focus on being present. And when you're in the present, you're not worrying, you're not overanalyzing, you're not overthinking, you're just enjoying the moment. So find ways to ground yourself. If you're really struggling with a decision, find some ways to just ground yourself, relax. Remember, just everything is working out for you. So I like to do that through meditation, which I've talked about so many times. I've become an avid meditator, and I used to suck at meditation, but I gradually built up the habit by starting really small and just compounding it over and over and over again. And now it's like second nature for me to meditate. The other thing I do is breathing techniques. So I really love to do grounding, breathing techniques. I may like also go out in nature, lay down on the floor. There's something about literally being on the ground and like connecting with nature that makes me feel grounded and peaceful. And I've noticed that the more I can journal or walk or take deep breaths or just practice being mindful and present, the better I've gotten at analyzing my thoughts, making better decisions, being more confident in my decisions, and not overanalyzing so much. So there's so many different ways in which you can practice that I talked about today. A bonus thing that I'll give that kind of already aligns with the things that I've given you is I started practicing making quick decisions. So let's say I'm in a store and I see 3 different shirts, 3 different colors, and I decide, oh, I want that shirt and I want it in that color. And I don't go back on it. I decide in that moment. I look at it, I think about which one I gravitated towards, and I choose that, and then I move forward. If I want to buy the shirt in a different color, I come back and get the shirt in a freaking different color. If I don't like the shirt when I go home, I go and try it on, I don't like it or something like that, I can come back and change it, but I decided. I taught myself that I make quick decisions. Or if I'm in a restaurant, I look through the menu, I may even check a little bit of the Yelp results, and then I decide. I don't ruminate, I don't go back and forth, unless the waitress is like, hey girl, don't order that, that's definitely bad. Then maybe I'll change my order. But for the most part, I've taught myself, you get into a restaurant, you decide, you move forward. You get into a massage parlor and you choose the massage that you want, you choose the time, and then you move forward. You are someone who's decisive. You are taking on the identity of someone who's decisive. So act like a decisive person. You have to be so you can do and have the things that you want. And when you start with that being, it's create an identity that I'm a decisive person. I'm leaving overthinking behind. I'm leaving overanalyzing behind. I'm leaving worry and rumination and perfectionism behind. And I'm becoming a decisive person who commits, who shows up to what they need to show up and do. Like how I did in this podcast. I showed up even though I have been going through the craziest of things today. You may even hear my baby in the background. And he's, crying a little bit. I need to go put him to sleep because I told you I'm recording this at night. But you can just show yourself that you can commit. You can show yourself that you can make decisions, and you can show yourself that you can keep showing up, and you will hit all of your goals. That is one of the success secrets. That is one of the things that I realized has made one of the biggest shifts in my life. Showing up, making decisions, moving forward, not letting myself hold myself back through perfectionism, through overanalyzing, through overthinking. So I hope these tips have been helpful for you. Just to recap, the first tip was set a decision deadline. The second tip was shift from thinking to doing. The third tip was reframe your questions. Switch them from problem to solution, okay? And then the fourth one is be present. And all of these things will show you how to stop overthinking. Overthinking is no longer going to hold you back because you now know these strategies. You're going to implement them and try them. For your action item for this episode, I would love for you to pick one of the practical strategies that I gave, and I want you to practice it for the next 30 days. Just practice this over and over again, whether it's being more mindful, setting the decision deadline, shifting your thinking, or reframing your questions. Pick one of them and commit to it for 30 days. And I actually want you to keep a notebook or maybe use a habit tracker app and just check off how many times you're making better decisions. And I promise in 30 days, you're going to be so happy with your progress, and you're going to start to realize how much of overthinking you've left behind and how much of a more decisive person you've become. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, and subscribe, and share this podcast with someone else. This may be the exact message that they need. So thank you so much for tuning in today. And as a bonus, I would love to give you guys access to my free guide, How to Prioritize Like a Pro, because if you tend to overthink, I'm sure you tend to not know how to prioritize and choose which tasks to do before others. So what I want to give you is my guide where I literally line out how to prioritize like a successful, productive person. So I'll show you the method that I use and my clients use to take our tasks, our long to-do list or our long brain dump, and actually prioritize tasks and know what to do each day of the week so that we can just be more clear-headed, get more done in less time, and just overall more productive. So go ahead and download that. You can find that in the show notes. Until next time, I'll see you then. Bye.